and he was taxed on with 2 horses, 1 cow, and a 60-gallon still. And that's the still that his son, once he mustered out of the war, came to Kentucky with, and made shitty whiskey for 170 years until Dad fixed it.
What's your title with the company now?
Zero.
Retired.
Zero. Retired.
Retired.
Retired. I get all the whiskey I can steal for all free, and I get all the business publications I want, and I get an office, and I get a cell phone and a computer,
And us.
and y'all. That's it. That's good. That's all I need. The other thing that happened in here, I've been out of school 6 months, okay, and Dad had his office in here. There's a picture. There's a picture of him here, and I'm sitting there with him trying to learn what's going on. He didn't talk much, so I had to dig it out of him. And in comes Mom, and she says, "Bill, we need to have a visitor program here at the distillery." And Dad said, "Oh, Marge, that's a great idea." And then she left. And I said, "What the hell was that all about?" I've been here 6 months. I haven't seen the first visitor. He said, "I don't know, but I'll find out tonight and tell you tomorrow." So the next day, I couldn't wait to get down there because there was no rational reason at all. So I get down here and Dad's here, and I asked him. He said, "Yeah, it's about your sister. She just gotten fired as the ground hostess at American Airlines at Louisville Airport, and she needs a job, and all she can do is talk." So that was perfect. But it also gave Mom access to that little red building over there. That's now the restaurant. It was the master distiller's house. And so, you know, if you're going to have visitors, you got to have air conditioning and bathrooms and little things like that. So that was the beginning. And then Leslie got a few visitors, and then she would go to the other distilleries, and they wanted they wanted to participate. So that's how it got started. And then it got out of control. Too many people thought it was a good idea. So then we turned it over to our association, and that's when it's really been professionally managed. But it's been pretty cool. It wears everybody out, but other than that. The other couple of things I want to show you here have got nothing to do with whiskey at all. The first one, my father was real peculiar about a whole side of the family. He would not talk about them. He wouldn't let you talk about them. And I was interested in them, but I couldn't figure out how to open the gate. So what he would do with me when I was really little, he would take me over to the other distillery, the one we had before this one, the T.W. Samuels distillery, and my great aunt lived there, right across the street from the distillery. And she'd babysit me, and she would tell me stories about these cousins and uncles of mine, the ones Dad wouldn't talk about. And she loved them. See, these are really great people. So let me tell you who they are. This old guy, this is my great-great-grandfather, and this is his brother. In that one picture right there, you're going to want to come look at this because this is rare. This old man right there, yeah, that is Uncle Reuben Samuels. That is a picture of Jesse James's funeral. Oh. He married Zerelda after she had the 3 kids, Susan, Frank, and Jesse. And that's him. And that's Zerelda sitting right beside him.
Jesse James' stepfather.
Yeah. If you go to the movies, you'll see they always refer to Ms. Zerelda, the mother, as Ms. Samuels, not Ms. James.
All right.
Because he's the one who raised him. And that's the house out in Kearney, Missouri. That's it's a
He
museum.
did a good job.
And that's the little tombstone. Okay, so that's where trouble started. But the thing that got them there, they're all Kentuckians. There were 5 Kentucky families that decided to go to Missouri all at the same time. To go to western Missouri, Kansas City, St. Joe. And all of the fathers had a college degree, which meant that 50% of the college-educated people in Kentucky in the 1840s were going to leave at once. They all went to Missouri. They all settled next to each other. And in a strange way, their sons all became famous. Okay? Because well, there's one of them right there, Cole Younger. Mr. Younger was a lawyer, and he was next to the James. These two guys right here married her two older sisters, the Pence boys. They own the huge general store in Kearney, Missouri, and that's the guy that married Susan James, Jesse Frank's little sister, and that's Jesse, that's Frank, that's Cole Younger, and that's their teacher. They got out there, they built a schoolhouse, and they made probably the worst executive hiring decision in the history of the United States when they hired the school teacher to teach those kids. They hired Quantrill, William Clark Quantrill, the famous guerrilla from Missouri. The guy that did the Lawrence, Kansas massacre and killed everybody. No wonder. He was a certified school teacher, and he was from Ohio. And so real quick through all this, what happened, once they did Lawrence, they were like infamous. I mean, I've actually been out to the Eldridge Hotel, which is one of the ones they burned down, the big one they burned down. I went out there, we got Bill Self, who's basketball coach at Kansas, and athletic director, and the governor and the mayor, and all of them sitting in the ballroom of the Eldridge, and I took about half his shit out there and apologized for my cousins burning their hotel. Gave them all a drink of whiskey. So, well, anywho, when they, after they did Lawrence, they were like on #1 on the wanted list. So they go to Texas. It wasn't much better down there. And this old man gets elected sheriff of Nelson County, which is the one we just came through and the one that we're all from. And Frank James gets the idea that maybe we could get some cover in Nelson County. So they slip in, Quantrill's group slips into, this is still during the war, slips into Kentucky. This is a wonderful letter Frank James wrote my aunt explaining how they were able to get into Kentucky to the family home to talk to the sheriff. The sheriff didn't have an answer. And so the war went on, and finally Lee surrendered. And then they found out the bad news that Grant was not going to grant pardons to the irregulars. The bushwhackers were going to die. And they just kept they just knocked them off. And great-great-granddaddy, after Quantrill was killed, it would not have happened if Quantrill hadn't gotten killed, because he was hated. He was the most notorious guerrilla. And so after he was killed, then they started talking about maybe we can get you guys back to Missouri. And so he got Captain Young, who was occupying Louisville, and I want to show you one of the great relics of the Civil War. Oh, excuse me. This is how they solved the problem. And the only irregulars to get pardons were the remnants of Quantrill's army. And this is Frank James's pardon from the Civil War.
All right.
And it was at our house. It was at Samuels, Kentucky, July 26. So it's 3.5 months after Lee surrendered. But this gave them permission to go back across Union lines to go home. That's what that's all about. And that's the original pardon. And at the little ceremony, Frank was heading up the group at that time. There were 13 of them. And he gave that firearm to Captain Young. And this old woman came out of the house because they surrendered in the side yard. Came out of the house, Captain Young gave her that revolver. That is the final Confederate firearm surrender during the war. Right there. And I went back to Colton, did the research. It was sold to a pharmacist in Lawrence, Kansas. Frank took it off a dead man. And that's well, and then they went back home. All the groups dispersed during the war except this group, because they were all neighbors. And so they went back and just stirred each other up. And within 6 months, they invented bank robbing. That's what they did. They robbed the first bank in the country. and continued for another 14 years until Jesse was eventually shot in the back of the head. And this is a picture the family has. It's an original tintype. They gave me a copy of it. That's the last picture taken of Jesse before he was killed. And that's Bob Ford, the guy that killed him.
Oh, wow.
Right there with him. It's right here.
This
Yeah.
one?
Right there. He's not in. And then after all of that, Frank would come back for a family reunion. He lived another 25 years. And that's the last time Frank came back to one of our reunions. That's him over on the far right, and that's my grandfather, my grandmother, and my aunts and uncles. You see why Dad was.
No wonder, yeah, no wonder we didn't talk about
So
that
he doesn't
side.
talk about it at all. It was,
That's funny.
anybody from Virginia? Here, this is, you probably know what that little school is, Washington College. My great-grandfather was.
Washington Lee?
Exactly. He was a student at Washington College. He graduated in 1868, and Robert E. Lee signed his diploma because he, Lee went to become the president. And then when Lee died in 18, and I've got the original that framed at home. But Lee did sign that, and we've got like 4 autographed pictures of the general from school days and all.
How about this one?